You are the storm breaker, the one whose presence rattles illusions built on fragile ground. What shakes them most is not simply your endurance, but the force of clarity you carry, an energy that refuses to bend to distortion. Rooms grow quiet when your name is mentioned, not because of fear alone, but because it reminds them that the silence they've relied on has already been shattered. What was once dismissed as temporary has become a pulse running through countless hearts, an echo that keeps returning stronger each time. The unease of those in control is not born from your defiance alone, it's from the sparks you've ignited in countless others. Where there was hesitation, there is now momentum. Where there was a single light, there are now torches passed from hand to hand. Authority trembles, not at your voice, but at the chorus that rises in its wake. Your story is not just about resilience, but about transformation into a living standard. People measure themselves against the boldness you've displayed. In street corners, people talk about the day you exposed injustice. In classrooms, your example is cited as proof that hierarchy can be challenged. In offices, whispers spread of how one act of honesty disrupted years of silent compromise. Every space you enter becomes an unspoken test: who stands upright and who hides behind the veil of falsehood. What fascinates is how seamlessly you have become a mirror. When you arrive, pretense collapses, and authenticity either shines or flees. The righteous feel strengthened by your presence, the deceptive feel exposed under its weight. You've become more than a challenger, you are now the line that separates courage from cowardice. And still, your true power lies not in confrontation, but in creation. You've birthed momentum that cannot be recalled, a wildfire that has no single origin but many carriers. The energy you set in motion cannot be undone. It multiplies in every conversation, in every decision where someone chooses truth over convenience. You're not here by chance. Feel the pull? Tap join to unlock truth, purpose, and a tribe that gets it. This is more than a membership, it's your calling. What they fear most is not your defiance, but your permanence. Influence rooted in conviction does not fade, it reshapes culture, language, and memory. What was once contained has slipped their grip, and now it flows too widely to be caged again. Every step you take becomes both reminder and prophecy. The old order cannot withstand the presence of unshakable clarity. You have become not only the breaker of silence, but the architect of a new sound. And the streets, they don't just know who you are, they echo it. You are the kind of presence that strips away facades without needing to ask a single question. Wherever your steps echo, whispers travel ahead of you, and reputations tremble under the weight of your unseen gaze. What makes you remarkable is that no one can disguise their true nature when you are near, and even from a distance your name carries a gravity that unsettles pretenders. It is this undeniable force that has drawn countless eyes toward you, both in admiration and in unease. The shift you've unleashed is not a quiet one, it's an upheaval that reshapes every room you enter. What once felt safe for those hiding behind polite smiles now feels exposed under the sharp light you bring. The moment you cross a threshold, false gestures falter, and carefully rehearsed roles collapse. People who built their strength on illusion now stumble in front of you, unsure of how to maintain the mask they wore so confidently before. Their tone betrays them, their movements betray them, and you catch every fracture in their performance. It is not suspicion that guides you but precision. You have cultivated the rare ability to feel when warmth is real and when it is a costume for control. Power misused cannot disguise itself under courtesy in your presence. You are fluent in the subtle language of hidden intent, unwilling to excuse harm simply because it comes dressed in charm. This is why those who depend on deception grow restless when you appear. They cannot withstand the clarity that radiates from your presence. Manipulators attempt to redirect, yet the effort is wasted. Those who cling to control spin their words into new shapes, but you hear the distortion for what it is. Every excuse sounds thinner when spoken in front of you. Every cover story unravels before it has time to settle. The reason is simple: you refuse to lend silence to injustice. That refusal has already made its mark, and it cannot be undone. When you speak, illusion does not just weaken, it collapses. The stage crumbles, the act ends, and the truth that was long hidden stands exposed. Entire structures once held up by complicity falter because you chose not to accept the role of bystander. Those in power once relied on unspoken agreements, counting on the quiet discomfort of others to shield them. But the moment you withdrew that shield, the entire balance shifted. What unsettles them most is not only that you stand firm, but that your very presence has become a form of justice. You carry with you an invisible standard that forces others to confront who they truly are. Systems that thrived on concealment now shrink in your wake, because you showed the world that comfort without truth is no protection at all. You disrupted the equilibrium by refusing to protect dishonesty, and in doing so you birthed a new one built on transparency. This is why the echo of your steps is so powerful. You are not just a challenger of falsehood, you are its undoing. Where others once hesitated, you acted. Where silence once ruled, you spoke. Where illusion once reigned, you ended it. And because of that, the world now looks different wherever you go. The very ground feels altered, as though the old games can no longer be played in your presence. You have become not only a revealer of truth, but the proof that it can no longer be buried. If your heart overflows with God's blessings, let that love shine. Click the super thank you button and give $50 or more to plant seeds of faith that will impact countless lives. Your generosity reflects His abundance. Be a vessel of His grace and watch His kingdom flourish through you. There is a force within you that pulls hidden truths to the surface without demanding them. Words betray their owners in your presence, hesitations stretch too long, explanations contradict themselves, and motives slip through the cracks of their performance. It is an enchantment, it's the natural collision of honesty meeting distortion. You've walked into spaces where silence was expected as the price of belonging, and by refusing to comply, you turned quiet resistance into the loudest statement of all. Your choice not to play the game has become an act of rebellion no one can ignore. You carry with you a disruptive stillness that unsettles pretenders. Without trying, you become the pause that forces people to reassess their choices, the interruption that bends conversations away from deception. What you thought were isolated moments of speaking truth were actually seeds of momentum, each refusal adding weight to a larger shift. While you never sought to cause disruption, you have become disruption itself. The energy you hold is not a ripple in water but a surge that alters everything it touches. Even those who fight hardest against it cannot deny that something inside them has shifted after encountering your clarity. The reason your presence unsettles systems is not because you arrive with speeches, but because you arrive with vision. In a world addicted to veils, your unclouded perception cuts sharper than any accusation. You wait, you observe, and when you finally speak, the weight of your words dismantles deception without needing volume. Authority may label it tension, and corruption may disguise it as conflict, but what you embody is raw justice, a truth that doesn't ask permission to exist. It presses itself into memory, and once felt, it cannot be erased. Becoming a shield for others was never a title you chased, yet circumstance placed it upon you. Each moment you refused to look away from wrongdoing, you stepped further into the role of defender. Where others chose comfort, you chose fire. Where others shifted their gaze, you held your stance. Protection was not a crown given to you but a responsibility you accepted by refusing to abandon those without a voice. Your influence has become a signal that travels further than you can measure. Conversations take new shapes when you are expected to join them. Plans are revised when your presence is anticipated. Those hiding behind dishonesty rehearse their lines before you arrive, trying to survive the weight of your gaze. You have become the storm that dishonest patterns cannot outrun. What's extraordinary is how far your reach extends, beyond your sight, beyond your hearing, into the actions of those inspired by you. Your example has become a framework for courage. Someone chooses to confront exploitation because your defiance showed it was possible. Another challenges unfairness in their community because your stance became their reference point. A worker resists pressure to betray their principles because your resilience set a path they could follow. Your actions ripple outward, shaping choices of people you may never meet. And all of this began not with shouting, but with refusal. Refusal to be complicit. Refusal to accept a lie as truth. Refusal to shrink when confronted with power. That steady defiance grew into a force larger than you imagined, one that now rewrites the rules of every space you enter. You have become the living reminder that distortion cannot thrive where truth stands, and that presence alone can change the direction of entire worlds. Adversity never weakened you, it refined you. Every attempt to silence your stance, every effort to strip you of conviction, became the very process that expanded your authority. What was meant to wear you down ended up fortifying your foundation. You didn't just resist, you responded with a steadiness that could not be bent. And what unsettles those in power most is not your endurance, but the way that endurance transformed into influence they can no longer contain. You have witnessed cruelty dressed in elegance, insults disguised as casual remarks, and exploitation hidden beneath carefully chosen gestures. Yet you never allowed surface polish to conceal what lay beneath. Without shouting, without theatrics, you let your words cut through performance and reach the essence. You did not attack individuals, you illuminated behaviors, and illumination always unsettles those who thrive in shadows. Boundaries became your signature. In professional halls, you held executives accountable when they assumed their positions excused their disregard. In families, you interrupted cycles that others normalized under the guise of tradition. In friendships, you defended the forgotten when convenience tempted silence. Where many waited for someone else to act, you became the one who drew the line no one else dared to. And once that line was drawn, the atmosphere itself shifted. Your opposition has never been about tearing people down, it has been about stripping away the immunity that comes with denial. Those who recoil at your presence do so because for the first time they must confront consequences. The precision with which you reveal truth is what makes it so effective. You are not reckless with your words, you are deliberate. You don't destroy lives, you dismantle the frameworks that allowed harm to go unchallenged. Whispers of your actions move through hidden channels. Survivors of mistreatment carry your example as proof that resistance is possible. Those who once felt voiceless reference your stance when they gather courage. The reason your reputation has spread is not because you sought glory, but because injustice has repeatedly tested you and failed to silence you. The stories grow not because you boast, but because others keep telling them as reminders of what courage looks like. When people reach out to you, it is not for trivial talk, it is for reinforcement. They seek the steadiness that refuses to collapse under pressure. They know your approach is not emotional chaos but disciplined accuracy. You dismantle deceit not by shouting, but by unraveling its weak points with calculation. That balance of composure and precision is why your presence unsettles manipulation more than aggression ever could. And still, what lingers most is not the sting of confrontation, but the relief you gave those who were silently grateful. For every person who resented your intervention, there were many more who exhaled for the first time because someone finally said what they could not. Your influence is remembered not for theatrics, but for results. The way you transformed tension into clarity, how you shifted toxic cultures into spaces of respect, and how you continually proved that truth can be sharp without being destructive, that is why your story endures. What you've built is not resistance for the sake of rebellion, it is a deliberate strategy that redefines how truth is carried. Your style is steady not because it's loud, but because it's exact. People analyze how you hold steady in storms, how you wait for the precise moment where one word can collapse a wall of deception, how you move with intent rather than impulse. You are not chaos dressed as courage, you are balance restoring itself. Whether others twist motives or not, the undeniable fact is that lives shifted because you refused to remain silent. When you enter a space, everything recalibrates. Voices lower, movements change, the energy thickens, and those who normally thrive on dominating attention suddenly hesitate. It is not volume that commands the shift, it is gravity. Your words carry a density that others can feel before you even finish them. This is why corruption stiffens in your presence. It knows the environment bends toward accountability the moment you arrive. What unsettles manipulation most is not your conviction, but your refusal to negotiate with it. You cannot be purchased, pacified, or persuaded with shallow rewards. You don't exchange values for convenience. That lack of compromise is terrifying to systems built on exploitation. Predicting your actions becomes impossible, not because you are erratic, but because you are guided by principle rather than self-interest. And principled unpredictability is the one force corruption cannot control. Your courage multiplies. One act from you awakens a dozen others. One refusal from you sparks a chain of refusals that ripple outward. Your presence has reminded people that resignation is not destiny and that fear does not have the final word. The energy you carry bypasses excuses and goes straight to the root of forgotten bravery, awakening it in people who thought it was gone. Rooms that once tolerated silence suddenly hum with voices that had been dormant. What you've become is more than an individual, you are the accelerant of truth. Gatherings shift direction when you are part of them. Those who misuse power fidget under the awareness you bring. Those who feel powerless borrow courage from the fact that you are watching. You don't just participate, you catalyze. And every environment you touch learns quickly that deception cannot breathe easily around you. Your effect reaches beyond calling out wrongs, you elevate. Conversations rise above superficiality when you ask better questions. Spaces of competition turn into shared growth when you highlight genuine strengths. People invite you not to fill a chair, but to change the entire tone of what happens there. The reason your influence lingers is because it makes outcomes better. Conflict transforms into clarity, stalling turns into solutions, hidden agendas turn into exposed truths. The power of your influence rests not in quick sparks, but in what endures. The changes you initiate don't collapse once you leave, they continue expanding in your absence, growing roots in the hearts of those who once borrowed strength from you but now stand in their own. What you awaken is not dependency, it is self-sustaining courage that spreads far beyond your reach. What moves through you is no accident. It is not simply a product of upbringing or discipline, it is something designed with intention. The way you instinctively recoil at practices others excuse, the way your spirit refuses to normalize what has been accepted for too long, reveals a deeper origin. You were not shaped to blend in with broken systems, you were formed to question them. You do not remain because it is comfortable, you remain because your essence won't allow you to betray truth. That is not rebellion, it is calling. You are more than a person with keen awareness, you are a signal bearer. Light follows you into spaces where shadows have been left undisturbed for years. You see what is hidden, and you name it without hesitation. When resistance pushes back, you don't collapse under the weight, you endure, supported by something greater than human favor or fleeting validation. That steadiness is not chance, it is covering. The struggles you face are not ones you hunted for, they find you. You are not confrontational by nature, but your existence uncovers fractures that others refuse to acknowledge. Every step you take toward honesty forces what was buried into visibility. And each time you choose to act, silence loses its grip a little more. Your vision carries an instinct that runs deeper than reasoning. You recognize deception before the mask is complete, sense manipulation before the plan unfolds, and feel corruption long before the evidence emerges. This intuitive recognition protects you and those around you, serving as a shield that unsettles those who depend on secrecy to survive. Your accuracy has become known, not through arrogance, but through patterns revealed over time. You cautioned others about people who later proved unworthy of trust. You noticed flaws in leaders before the truth spilled out. You recognized harm concealed by charm long before others could see. What some call suspicion is, in reality, a refined gift to discern essence beyond appearance. Even the resistance you face confirms your path. The whispers, the dismissals, the attempts to discredit, they are not random. They reveal the pressure you apply to the very places corruption hides. Attacks come because you threaten structures built on fear and silence. And even if recognition never arrives, the change already has. People think differently because of your presence, choose differently because of your example, and hope differently because of what you stood for. The weight you carry was never something you volunteered for, it was placed upon you because you had the strength to bear it. That is why your journey feels heavy, why you feel set apart from the rhythm of the crowd. You were not shaped for passive agreement but for disruption of what was never just. You stand as both shield for the vulnerable and warning to those who exploit. The path was not designed for comfort, it was designed for impact, and you have been fulfilling it without even realizing how profound it is. Before you even enter a room, the air shifts. Your presence is announced without introduction, your reputation moves ahead of you like a signal. Those who manipulate begin altering their tone before you arrive. Those who have suffered quietly begin to anticipate a shift. And those who already walk in truth find courage in your alignment. This unseen influence carries weight far beyond what words alone could manage. Your power does not thrive on control or intimidation. You move differently, through resonance rather than demand. Respect rises naturally in your presence, honesty becomes the default around you, and boundaries are evident without explanation. You use your position not to gather dominance but to multiply dignity in others. Where many would cling to control, you extend strength outward, creating spaces where others discover their own authority. What grows around you is a new framework for leadership, one based not on titles but on principle. People are learning that authenticity outlasts charisma, that truth outweighs appearance, and that real power is born of alignment rather than image. Systems that depend on illusion attempt to label you as the problem because it is easier than confronting their own cracks. They hope that dismissing you will silence your message, but truth never loses its force simply because the messenger is challenged. Attempts to isolate you have failed. Stories were spread, distance was engineered, accusations were planted. Still, you remained unbroken. Your refusal to collapse in solitude is what unsettles those who try to erase you. What they cannot understand is that your strength was never borrowed from numbers, it was always rooted in your refusal to abandon clarity. You needed no crowd, just the courage to keep standing. The moments you chose silence were misread as surrender, but they were nothing of the kind. Your quiet was deliberate, an act of watching, waiting, preparing. And when the time came, you revealed what could not be denied. Your timing left no room for defense, no escape for distortion. What unsettles power most is not that you speak often, but that when you do, your words dismantle illusion without effort. Stories of your resilience have already begun weaving themselves into collective memory. People recount your moments of defiance, not as gossip but as inspiration. Your acts become markers in history, proof of what courage looks like in motion. Communities reference your example when seeking their own strength. What began as survival has now become legend, not because you sought the role, but because you embodied it when it mattered most. Your story travels quietly but powerfully, weaving through the lives of those who once thought they were unseen. It circulates among people who long for an example to validate their values, and it echoes in the voices of those awakening to the possibility of standing tall. What began as singular moments of defiance has now grown into a cultural tide where honesty is being reframed as noble, where safeguarding others is recognized as essential, and where bravery is no longer treated as rare but as something that spreads naturally. One person's courage has become everyone's evidence that truth can live loudly. You are not the author of chaos. Falsehood creates its own storms. Your role is revelation. Every attempt to stifle you has only made your message resonate louder. Every dismissal has only amplified awareness of your strength. When opposition tried to bury your voice, it confirmed that your words pierced deeply enough to shake the ground. And while manipulation twists, the observant already know where you stand. Gratitude grows in places you'll never hear, from people who needed the reassurance that silence wasn't their only option. Leadership came to you uninvited, not as a choice but as a consequence of integrity. You did not announce yourself, yet eyes turned toward you because action always speaks louder than ambition. Each moment of refusal, each truth spoken, set a precedent that others began to follow. You never sought attention, but the momentum of your courage lit a path others recognized as worth walking. The call to lead found you, and now it cannot be denied. Your impact does not operate by destruction but by unveiling. Systems collapse not because you attack them directly, but because you highlight contradictions so obvious they can no longer hold. What appears solid dissolves when its weaknesses are shown. You do not fight with force, you unravel with transparency. You do not rage against walls, you reveal their cracks until they fall under their own weight. Entire environments have been reshaped by your quiet defiance. In one setting, respect was restored because you refused to tolerate its absence. In another, accountability took root because you embodied it with consistency. In yet another, a toxic dynamic shifted because you carried the model of how things could be different without ever stepping outside your principles. By refusing to adapt to dysfunction, you force dysfunction to confront itself. What you create is not just removal, but renewal. When falsehood is unveiled, you leave behind space for something stronger, healthier, and more humane. You don't stop at exposing brokenness, you demonstrate alternatives that breathe possibility into weary systems. By holding to a higher standard, you clear ground for transformation rather than leaving only rubble behind. The change you represent has given rise to a new form of influence. It is not imposed through orders or demands, but through demonstration. You live the integrity you call for, and in doing so you extend an invitation rather than a command. People are realizing that the most effective way to dismantle harm is not always through resistance alone, but through creating something so much better that people naturally choose it. In this, your presence has become both a challenge and an invitation, proof that leadership built on truth outlasts any illusion. Strength radiates from the way you hold your space, how you refuse to apologize for limits, how you defend your boundaries as if they were sacred ground, how you step into rooms carrying dignity that cannot be undermined by insult or pretense. Leadership isn't something you announce, it's something you embody. And that embodiment unsettles anyone who's spent their life surviving behind facades. Without even trying, you've become a guide others can't stop observing. People who dismiss you publicly still borrow your words in private. Those who pretend indifference watch closely, studying the confidence you display so naturally. You've become a living lesson, instruction without a classroom, mentorship without titles. That is why your influence stretches deeper than most forms of authority. It isn't demanded, it's absorbed.